Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in this week. Today we're going to be talking about getting started with D&D, and in particular we'll be looking at playing the game. So with this episode we're going to cover the things that you might need. There's a whole bunch of stuff we've got to cover today. Maybe talk about what we're going to do as well. But yeah, so that's going to be our episode. So just to start, I'm Jordan. You've heard from me before in this.
I'm Jamie. You've hopefully heard from me before. Maybe not. So we're going to be going over the basics of what you need. So that is literally the bare minimum that you need to get up, to get running, to get going. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that it's going to be expansive or whatever, but gets it up, gets it running, lets you see what D&D is about, lets you work out whether you like it, and helps hopefully to kind of break you into that. So what do you actually need to get started?
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could actually start with, but we're just going to start with the basics, which is going to cover things like friends, rules, dice, doing your research if you're somebody that's into rules, or even just into learning more about the worlds that you're going to be playing in, and also things like your characters, your sheets, and basically a story. But I think, why don't we start with anybody that's listening in or watching? We would love to hear about your first experience playing a game, and how you felt about that when we first played. And for us, well, Jamie, how was it for your first game?
Again, it was an interesting experience. So we kind of all sort of jumped in at the deep end. At the time, you and I hadn't played it before. The other friends that we were there with, another two hadn't played it before. So, and there was another two that had played it maybe once, twice, possibly. I can't 100% remember on that, but basically everybody was new. And there was a lot of stuff going on with the story, which was good, made it interesting, but you were trying to remember bits of the story, you were trying to remember how to actually read and work out what was going on with the character sheet, and then you're trying to remember bits about other people's characters, and there was a lot of stuff going on. So we were all pretty much in at the deep end, so it made it a bit confusing. It was a bit tiring as well, because you were having to think every couple of minutes about what was going on, what was happening, and you know, looking back, there was bits and pieces that you would think would have been better if it was tweaked, but that's ultimately just the benefit of experience and hindsight. But thankfully we had all the basics of getting started, so it then meant that we'd done it again and again, and everybody got into the swing of things, and it was something that we've been doing now pretty regular.
Yeah, almost every week.
Yeah. And how was that? How was that first game for you?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I started off with, initially I felt like D&D was maybe going to be too complicated for me, so I just put it off, because I started with other games like Call of Cthulhu, and there's a bunch of other stuff like Trails of Cthulhu, and more horror based stuff, but that's where I started. So I kind of had some of the basics already. I knew like about all the dice, I had all of that, understood reading character sheets. It was just for D&D that it was a bit more there was more detail, at least it felt like that before I played. So, but actually having that first game, it wasn't as bad to get into. I just felt like it was a lot to juggle at first, in terms of just doing your rolls and your saving throws and things, and there's just a lot of new terms that you're probably already doing in other games. It's just that they've got terms in D&D. You've got saving throws, and how do you make a saving throw? Are you proficient in it, and how does that all make your bonuses? But over time, it's not as bad as you start to pick some of this stuff up, and even just making a character can really help just figure out what all the bits on the sheet means, and just by playing it, I mean, after that first game, it was fine. I kind of felt like you were saying, it was almost like double work, because you're kind of secondary processing all your stuff through this other character. But after that first game, it was a lot easier from then. So overall, I quite enjoyed it. Just was, I felt like a lot of work at first. Just because I played a caster as well, that was hard work for my first time playing a caster. But got there in the end, and so I've been playing for 3 and a bit years, maybe approaching, or maybe 3.
Probably longer. But yeah. So pretty much the same experience then. But yeah, that's the thing. But I mean, what we'd like to know as well is how was your first game? If you're a kind of relatively new player or even an experienced player, what happened in it? What do you think would have been better if it was tweaked for somebody that was totally brand new? And if you are a new player, hopefully you're not put off by the both of us saying that, or anything else that you might read from anyone. But if you do want to contribute, we've got Discord, we've got other social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, and also if you're looking at this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube, then there's comments down below that you can stick something in as well. But suppose we should look at the first thing that you need, which is friends. So friends, right, hopefully that's pretty obvious that to play a game that involves interacting with other people, you do in fact need people. So I mean, the thing is, although we've said friends and we've called that our category, friends, the thing that you need, look, at the end of the day, there's lots of groups and things on Facebook and elsewhere that you can go and you can find people, and about a couple of the groups and the kind of things that you see on it and what sort of things to expect.
Yeah, totally. So there's tons of stuff. Literally, like, we're obviously from Scotland, and I mean, there's one called D&D Scotland. If you just type in Dungeons and Dragons in Facebook, you're going to find tons and tons of groups.
Yep.
And I mean, what is really good about these groups, and even on Discord you get them as well, and a lot of the Facebook groups will link to Discord, where you can speak to individuals, and they'll make up basically campaign groups for, let's say you join a bunch of guys online, they'll make a wee Discord kind of private channel for you and your team, basically, where your DM can put in notes and stuff. It's super facilitating, which you wouldn't have really been able to do like 5 years ago. Well, you could have, but I don't think a lot of people would have done it 5 years ago. So it's much easier to do now. So definitely, it's one of these things as well where it's a lot more accessible than it's ever been. Yeah. So if you're ever wanting to play a game, don't be shy about just dropping a message. I think every day in one of the groups I'm in, somebody will say, I'm new, or I'm looking to play these times during the week, or this many times. Instead of maybe like a time during the week, it'll be, they say they want to play twice a week, and people just put out there, basically what they want to play. And there's almost always someone that's going to respond, and reasonably quickly. So certainly that's something I would definitely recommend.
Yeah, and when you're searching for things, would you recommend going for like a country rather than a city when you're looking for a group? So like D&D Scotland rather than D&D Glasgow, Edinburgh, or London, or whatever.
Yeah, I think you can get away with, at least in Facebook, you can get away just typing D&D group or something, and it will give you the stuff. Generally, it does the closest groups.
Just local.
But I mean, I'm part of other groups as well that isn't kind of local to me, and there's some that's even other countries, and that shouldn't stop you if you kind of feel like you're in a group and you're not getting the people you want. Definitely look at other places as well, because most of these guys are playing online, especially now.
Yeah.
So it's I've played with people across the country or even different countries. There's guys in the States that I occasionally play with on Sundays and stuff. So, and that's through these online groups. So I mean, it's dead accessible, but start closer, and you're more likely to find real friends in real life. But yeah, so it's one of these things.
Yeah, and it's always handy if you all speak the same language as well. So start local. I suppose that's the best advice. And talking about starting local, another good place to look is local comic shops and places like that. More often than not, they'll have nights that they do. They'll have different people turning up to that, where again you'll meet somebody that might they might just have a story that just sits perfectly with the way that you would like the game to be ran. And I suppose that's the thing as well, that every game is going to be different based on who's running it and what they're doing. So that's another good option as well to go and see how it is. And again, you've been to a few, haven't you?
Yeah, I run a lot of games at one of the comic shops near me, and it's a good way. A lot of people will. Some of the guys I've played with would say prefer to play it online, and I totally get that. It's dead convenient. You don't need to travel anywhere. It's convenient. But for us, when we do it, I do it with a couple of people that me and a couple of guys go there, and we met a bunch of guys that we now play with quite regular. And a big part about it is just to hang out with people. We just hang out and just get to see and be in an environment where everybody's playing, because there's maybe about 4 or 5 groups, and I mean like reasonably large groups, so you're speaking about 4, 5, 6, 7 players.
Yeah.
So there's usually quite a lot, and even the comic shop, definitely if you've got one nearby, it's worth dropping in and seeing if they've got a D&D night. For us, it's every Monday they do D&D nights, but they've got Yu-Gi-Oh nights and all this other stuff that you might be interested in. But even if you're totally new, staff, at least in my experience, will generally try and match you with people to actually play with. And if they can't find anyone, or if maybe the DM says no because they've got so many people, or it's a really difficult game to start with if you're new, quite a lot of times they will actually make a game or play a game with you. They'll run it, even if it's just between you and the person or the staff member. They'll run a game. So I find that really, really good. It's something that I definitely would recommend. And one of the things as well, when you're meeting up with people eventually, or if you get a group of dedicated people, or at least people that want to play maybe more than one game, it's really about setting up a kind of what's useful is setting up a schedule. Now you don't need to be super regimented with it. I mean, we do most weeks, it's been a bit more flexible. Just different times of year tend to get more flexible, like generally Christmas, and you've got people around birthdays. It tends to be more flexible, but having some form of group that you might visit regularly is going to make it easier for you to play more games and learn more. But I would definitely say don't let that be something that you have to do. I mean, if we're starting a game, we've been doing one campaign in particular for a couple of years or more, actually more than a couple of years. Now, if we were starting that, and the pitch was you're going to be playing for 2 years, I would be like, nah. It's just, I don't mind long campaigns, but it becomes or sounds like work to me when you're committing that long. Whereas we've been quite good. We've not really had that expectation,
Yeah, and that's the thing. Don't put a schedule on it. Don't make it an expectation, because, like Jordan was saying, it starts to turn into work. It starts to turn into a chore, even if you don't necessarily think that at first. Eventually, at some point, there's going to be a time that you're a bit tired, but you know that you're scheduled to be there at Wednesday at 8 o'clock, or whatever it is, that's the time's ticking away, and that's going to start to happen. If you let it be organic, and that you're running off everybody's excitement or drive, or whatever you want to call it, for the next game, then it means that everybody's there and they're fresh and they're focused and they're enthusiastic and they're going to commit, rather than you've got 50% of the people there are dragging their heels because they just need a break, they just need some time away from it. So, I mean, don't make it a schedule. Don't have people thinking that they're pressured to make it there, and everything will work out great from that point. And that's the thing, just communicate, talk to people and let them know that, because it's really easy as well for people to fall in the trap and to think that that's what's going on, and that there's people relying on them to turn up because their character last week fell down a well, and how they're going to get them out if they're not there, or whatever's going on in the story that they're a part of, that they feel like not turning up is letting other people down. You don't ever want that. I mean, it's just not a good situation to be in.
Do you know, that actually brings me, because I mentioned actually having a schedule, and I liked how you were speaking about schedules there, because when I'm speaking about the schedules, it's because we're meeting every week. We're not new. There's been a lot of new players that I've ran for, but in that core group, but it's really, when you're starting out, it's actually important. That's a good point. When we speak about, or when I speak about schedules, that's maybe if you have a core group of people that are playing something that is going to be a longer form thing, because otherwise it could take 2 years. Now we play almost every week, and it's 2 years, but I mean, like,
But again, that evolved into that, you know.
Yeah, letting it become, like, it doesn't need to be a hard, fast, note it in a diary schedule, but it's, especially when you're starting out, you know, it's worth, you know, especially if you're playing, just approaching it organically. Just go to a game and go to a comic shop and say, can I play with any of yous, or ask the staff member, is there any games going that I can join?
Yep.
And just go, and don't feel like you have to attend somebody else's games as well. Just have fun with it, and if you want to stick with them, you'll do that.
Yep.
If you don't, then that's fine too. You can go and try again next week, or it might influence you to actually run a game at some point, you know. Which we'll be talking about at another point.
Yep. Yeah. Again, we'll be going into more detail like that in, you know, future episodes. And just now we're gonna hopefully stick to just the kind of core. This is what you need, and, you know, drift off a little bit and talk about maybe an experience and why we've came to the conclusion that we've came to. But yeah, at the end of the day, just getting people. That's the goal. So no matter what way you do it, as long as you've got people there, success.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the most important bit, because otherwise you're just going to be running or playing a game for yourself, you know. It's definitely good. I mean, the thing is, you'll probably find quite quick that you'll find people that are willing to play, and you'll probably find a group of people quite quickly that you'll be interested in playing games with more frequently. One thing actually that's good about finding people is there's going to be games that you will have people that you don't like that much. That's also something, and it's totally okay, you know. There's experiences I've had at not the local comic shop, but definitely other games at different areas, but or different systems. So D&D, but any role-playing game can follow this. But yeah, there's people I've played with, and it just didn't really work out, or it was somebody that wasn't that interested, you know. And you'll get a feel for that when you meet these people.
Yeah.
So certainly it's good to get a core, or it's good to meet people and bring in basically friends, or even your own friends, and trying it out with them. But it's okay, you know. If you find people you don't like, it's definitely, you can just not do it the next time, you know, and you'll find other people that will, and eventually you'll get a group of guys that you'll want to play with all the time. So yeah, and yeah, just following on from what Jordan was saying there as a kind of last wee bit to round this section off, if, like, for us, the way it worked was our friends suggested playing to us, and then we turned up, and then everything's went from there. So if you're in their position, you know, you're talking to a group of people that you're not 100% sure whether they'll want to turn up, or if they do turn up, whether it'll be for them, then again, kind of going back to the schedule thing, just make sure they know there's no pressure on doing it, because if they feel pressured to turn up, they don't really want to be there, and it's just going to be a bit of a drag for them, and it's also potentially going to be a drag for you as well, because you're having to kind of nurse them through the whole the whole situation. So you know, the best group of people to get is a friend that seems up and is enthusiastic for it, and that they know that there's no pressure on them to be turning up all the time, or, you know, there's pressure for them just to turn up in the first place. So if you can tick all those boxes, then you're on to a winner. Yeah, and actually, just to kind of wrap up that bit as well, there's going to be some people that will want to treat it very. If you find somebody that's super passionate about it, you will find sometimes if you're starting and somebody's like, okay, if you want to play, we're playing every week, or they want to play every week, let's say, or maybe your DM wants to play every week, you know, don't let that put you off either. You know, you can be quite upfront, and some people might, you know, if you get a serious group, you'll find that they tend to, I mean, when serious, I don't mean like a proper group of D&D players. What I just mean is a group of people that are really into it. So maybe it's like people that meet every single week generally, or they play more than once a week, and they do the voices and all that, and they know all their spells off by heart and all the effects, you know. Sometimes these people do like to play super frequently, but just don't let that intimidate you either, because the reality is, for the most part, most people will understand that you're just trying it out. And maybe at a later point, if you're interested in how committed they are to the game, you might want to join them. But, you know, sometimes being an adult won't let that happen, but you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that's I think about friends, but maybe we'll start talking about the rules and what you need to know to get started. Yeah, so moving into the rules then, Jamie, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so strangely enough, if you play a game, there are going to be rules. And you need to know these rules, follow these rules, and so on, so that you have a game. If you don't do that, then it's just chaos, basically, and you're no longer playing a game. So how do you get the rules for D&D? Well, unfortunately, at this point, you're probably going to need to spend some money here. Now, the kind of core rule books are, I mean, with the best will in the world, they're a bit expensive. They're probably the price of like an academic textbook, so you're talking £30-40 per book. And if you're doing it properly, you've got a different set of rules in the Player's Handbook, which is, funnily enough, relating to players and what they need, classes and so on. And then you've got the Dungeons Master's Guide, which has got a different set of rules. You do get a kind of multi-pack set of the Dungeons Master's Guide, the Monster Manual, and the Player's Handbook, which has got a discount on it. I can't remember what the kind of discount is for doing it, but basically if you look at the price of the books individually and then the three combined in the package, works in a bit cheaper. And as well as that, you also get a couple of wee extra bits and bobs, don't you? You get a
DM screen and stuff. So that's a Dungeon Master screen that has a big dragon in the front. It's all got metallic covered in paint. It's great. And inside the DM screen, you usually get quick rules as well. So it's quite handy.
Yeah. So that's like the proper way of doing things, the official way of doing it. Ultimately, you can find people that have put the proper rules up online in different places, but we wouldn't recommend that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I mean, it's technically pirated, so naughty. And the other thing is that at the end of the day, that's somebody's interpretation of whatever the rule is, and the more you play this and the more you look at the rules, you go, do they mean this or do they mean that? There's a lot of things that can be read and taken in one or two ways, and it ultimately comes down to your interpretation of it. So that's the kind of points of caution at this point. And yeah, that's that's a kind of a warning there, a foreboding on what not to do.
Yeah, I mean the thing is as well, I mean you get things like homebrew rules, which is almost like modified rule sets for D&D, but to be honest, you're not really going to be experiencing them unless you've played a few games, or probably if your DM's trying to run some homebrewed style campaign that has different types of rules that they're experimenting with. But the main thing as well is, I mean, getting all the big rule books, it's a big commitment. It took me a long time before I bought it, because I just had I had a Wizards of the Coast who publish D&D. They've got their own quick start guide, and it's literally basic rules, and I believe the basic rules are completely free as well. So
yeah. And again, if you go on to Wizards of the Coast website, who are the publishers of Dungeons and Dragons, you will find a basic set of rules there. So again, our recommendation at that point is go for that. Don't find somebody else's interpretation. Go for the basic rules. It gets you up, it gets you started, it lets you test out whether you're going to be into this, because you don't want to spend, at the end of the day, you don't want to spend money on anything and then discover that actually, do you know what, you don't like it and you wish you never. So go there, look at that at first, try it out, see how it is, and if it's something you think you're into, or if it's something that you and another friend think you're into, the best way of doing things is to work out the bare minimum of what you need, and then go, right, okay, well, if there's two of you, split in half, or you buy one book, somebody else buys another book, and kind of have joint custody over what you've got. It's the most economic way of doing it. It's the most sensible way of doing it as well. And then further down the line, if you're really into it, you'll get your own stuff anyway.
Yeah, totally. And if there's actually something that you're wanting to do as well in terms of reading the rules, you've got, I mean, people have got cheat sheets online and they aren't pirating the rules. What it basically is, though, is boiled down, here's some, basically, a bunch of rules on a page. Generally, that's not going to be that useful until you kind of know, because it assumes you know the rules, and it's usually some tips. But I think ultimately, though, is, you know, if you're playing, you know, because really buying and committing to getting rule books, that's stuff that we might cover in the episode about running the game and getting started with that. But actually, if you're playing, don't worry so much about like buying all these rules before you even know if you're going to be interested. Like we spoke about visiting comic shops and getting a bunch of guys that are interested in playing, and yeah, absolutely, you know, go there and just say, put your hand up and be like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. It was like playing with the guys when we first ever started playing D&D. I didn't have a clue. I didn't want to read the rules, to be honest, because I was busy with work and stuff, you know, so I'm like, I'm not that bothered. I'll just put faith in the guys to just keep me right. And, you know, that's it. And I think really the take home, if you're going to be a player, don't feel like you have to come in knowing everything. It helps for your first game, but, you know, unless you're wanting to either study a kind of quick start guide or like the free rule set that you get from Wizards of the Coast, or you're going to just purchase a book anyway, then, you know, don't worry about not knowing much. Your DM will keep you right. And I mean, like, when you're playing games a lot of time, the rules maybe don't quite follow exactly what it is, but you find as long as narratively things work, you probably won't even notice a rule hasn't been followed, you know. Yeah,
and that's the thing as well. Although we're talking about the rules and you need rules, remember that the rules, they're more of a set of guidelines, and that's the best way to think about them. And that's for a kind of couple of reasons. One is that if your DM doesn't know any one particular rule off the top of their head, they've got a vague recollection of what it is, then flow is key in the games. If you need to go away, you need to get a book, you then need to find whatever page it's on, you then have to scan the page, you then need to find the bit, you then need to read what it is, and then after you've read it, you need to think about it, you then need to think how that applies to the current situation, and then that's when you then go and you roll the dice and then you figure out whatever's happened. Rather than going, I think it's roughly this, that seems good enough, right, let's go with it, and then it means the game keeps moving and keeps going. And then the other thing, the kind of flip side of the coin, is you either know what the rule is and you're choosing to ignore it because the way that you want the situation to play out story wise it's going to clash with, or it just makes more sense to you that it should be this way rather than that way. And that's the thing with Dungeons and Dragons overall. It's nothing is set, everything is down to the interaction, the combination of the DM and the players, and that's what makes it what it is. So just bear that in mind. Although we're talking about rules, the rules are the thing that you fall back on when things get a little bit too chaotic, and just think about them as a guideline or pointers that's going to steer you in the right direction and keep the story moving and keep it on track.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of actually the getting started side of it, I think really the main things that we talk about, and I'll come back to the guidelines things, that's quite important, is if you're playing, don't bother, just go play. If you're interested in playing, you've got your local comic shops, you've got your pals, you've got people you can speak to, and you'll learn the rules through playing with them. And once you've decided 100%. You're committed, or you would like to know more, or you want to get more stuff about barbarians and all that stuff in the Player's Handbook, you know, really the book that you really need to start playing, or even start running, it only really needs to be the Player's Handbook. And I found the Dungeon Master's Guide a great supplement, but actually I ran it off of kind of the free rule set that you get, and then I got the Player's Handbook that I pretty much use. I've barely used the DM's Guide other than for extra stuff. But yeah, so definitely, you know, you can get started for free by visiting people that know how to play it, and then you can definitely feel free to commit, and we'll probably cover this in a different episode, but kind of circling back to what Jamie's saying around flow, and kind of keeping the narrative going and things. You know, I think a really important thing about that is once you do have the rules and you are playing games, I think one that's important, if a DM runs a rule different, you know, don't get your knickers in a twist about it, just let them do it. They could just have it wrong. They might actually just be trying to screw you over, if depending on the game, who knows. But the point is, let it just unfold, you know, because it's about keeping it moving. And I think when it comes to the time, when we talk about this in another episode at some point, but when it comes time for you to run a game and you're looking at flow, the main thing is just keep it consistent. If you didn't know what the rule was, or if you've went, chugging a potion, I've said is a bonus action, which I think is technically an action if I remember correctly, although I'm sure that you can correct me if I'm wrong. But in terms of when we play, we've just stuck with bonus action. It's more playable for us, but we've kept it consistent, you know.
Yeah, and I again, without going into kind of too much detail on that, and because it's kind of wandering away from what we were kind of planning doing here, but the reason that we done that is because it was a rule that our group had seen other groups using, and then between everybody there, everybody, including the DM, felt that the actual physical act of taking a swig from something isn't going to take a huge amount of time, and therefore it falls into the bonus action times rather than the free action where you can do it and almost discount that you've done it, rather than an action where, you know, you're making that the same sort of length of time as physically trying to attack somebody or disengage if somebody's grabbed you or whatever, something that is a big movement that takes a lot of energy. It kind of just felt right that it sat in between that, and it's not going to be the same for every group, of course. Other people are going to think that no, it does take a lot of effort to do that. Other people are going to think even less than us, and they're going to put it in the free action category, and, you know, whatever else. But again, like Jordan's saying, the point is, if that's the call that's been made, go with it, and the flow being kept as intact as possible is what's going to give you the most enjoyment, rather than stopping, doing a mini bit of research, then going back to the game, and then stopping, doing another bit of research, and so on and so on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the thing is as well, it's like if you're getting started, then it's totally okay not to know the rules, but eventually you get to the point where you buy them, and we'll talk about studying and things like that later on. But, you know, it's like, ultimately, you know, if you're going to be playing and you're getting started playing, like what we are saying, you know, you've got somebody else that's dealing with that problem who's running the game. You know, they let them deal with all the issues. But ultimately, you're going to have fun anyway. You know, I think it's not often that I've played a game that I didn't enjoy. There's maybe been less than a handful of times I can even think of, you know. So yeah, definitely, the rules. They're hard work, definitely, if you're getting started. So don't break your back over learning them all, because that's the DM's job instead. But, you know, definitely once you're kind of feeling like you're more committed and you've been with that group, it's definitely worth buying. Player's Handbook's, I think, priority. But if you get a bundle and you're willing to spend, I think some of the bundles are like 80 or 90 quid. So it's a lot of money if you're not sure. But, you know, you can always borrow somebody's, you know. Yeah,
that as well. That, you know, don't be afraid to ask about borrowing other people's books to figure out, again, whether it's something that you go, actually, this is something I will refer to a lot, so I'll get myself a copy. Or even if it's just as simple as, right, okay, I didn't realise this was the spin in this book, so that's something that I'm not actually looking for. And again, even if it's just a quick scan, again, if you're at a comic shop and there's somebody there that's got something that you haven't seen, have a quick scan, see what it's like.
Yeah, totally. I think people are more than willing to share their stuff. I mean, there's one of the guys that I know that will bring out, it's a hobby bag and it's full of all his stuff, and he's like, look at this, and he'll bring out amazing dice and all these books that he's got, and he's just playing the game, you know. He's not actually running it, and he's got all this stuff, but what it is actually And some of the comic shops, I think, actually let you do this as well, where if you're not sure, people will offer you the book. If you ask them, they'll give you it. And if you're not sure, you could ask one of the guys, hey, I'm at the comic shop because I'm thinking of getting into it. Can I sit down? Like one of the ones I go to has a cafe in it. So you could be like, can I just give it a quick read at the cafe and see? And you can pick up stuff that way.
Yeah.
Plenty of ways to get started with the rules, but certainly as a player, I think my big rule is don't worry about it too much. Like that's my job if I'm running it, and if there's anything I'm doing wrong, I'll correct it at some point. Generally, it's quite easy to correct the rules. It's better to correct them after kind of moving through all the actions to keep your flow than it is to kind of try and read it on the go. But if it does get to the point where a group has to open the book, then that's fine too. But you'll find that the night flies by quicker if you just have the flow. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I think that's everything from me about the rules. If we want to move on,
let's take a look at dice.
So getting dice. So we've spoke about the rules, and probably, to be honest, your biggest commitment is actually going to be getting books because they are the most expensive. I mean, not until recently, we've generally, at least with our guys, we tend to run homebrew campaigns or stuff that we've made. Like Jamie's done like a couple of games already, and it wasn't D&D, but he made a spy game and stuff. I've not ran as many D&D games with you. Have I run a D&D with you guys in particular? I've run on other games, but I run a lot of D&D with other groups, but I'm kind of getting mixed up now.
No, you've not. It's been mainly Call of Cthulhu and things, because just the way that our group is, that you're normally in the player category rather than the DM category, so you're kind of you're on the subs bench a bit for that one.
Aye, but that's the thing as well, because it's one of the guys we play with. We've had generally everybody takes turns of running stuff, but I think really a big part of when we play, it's that long-term campaign. So, and the guy that runs it, I mean, I was looking at notes for a campaign I've been running for a different group, so sorry Jamie, but I mean that's not been going on that long, and my notes are flaming ridiculous, they're huge. So I mean our guy his books must be like, he must have like 30,000 words or something going, because I mean it's been playing it for like 6 times the time that I've been playing.
I mean, easily it would be that, I'm sure,
unless he wings it every week and then he's just a genius.
Well, unless he does that, but no, I think from memory there's at least like 6 notebooks that are full of stuff.
It's packed.
But
so
dice.
Speaking about dice, and the investment's going to be buying rule books. And like we mentioned, you don't have to make that an investment. And the other reason I was coming on to that was, as well as other things you might spend money on, we might talk about this another time, is actually if you don't want to sit down and make games because it's time consuming, and you're probably going to write like 5 to 10 times more than what you probably should to actually run the game. But you've got loads of campaign guides as well, and they generally are expensive. But dice, on the other hand, are a nice small financial commitment. You can buy a whole bunch for like a tenner, and you've got 7 or 8 packs. It's brilliant.
And again, the thing is with dice, like the books, you don't necessarily need to make sure every single player has a set as well as the DM, but if you do have more than one set, it's going to speed things up. And again, that's us coming back to flow, and it's going to make things a lot easier. Contrasting with that, if you are completely brand new, it's probably not a bad idea to have the one set, because then what it means is that when you're rolling that set, you've got everybody kind of focused on that roll and what's happening, which then means that you're getting used to the system and how it works and so on, and you've got somebody there to help you out if you're a little bit mixed up. And because you're having to move the dice and share the dice about, you're then all starting to recognise it's this shape that's the D20, which is a quick way of saying a 20-sided dice, or a D4 or a D6, whatever it is. You get that recognition a bit quicker as well, because you're having to ask somebody for a dice or the group of dice, and then having to look through it and so on and so on. So everybody's all pitching in together, and if somebody recognises it quicker than you, again going back to flow, naturally people are going to point that out to you, which then means that if you've got somebody that's picking it up a bit quicker, they're helping the whole group pick that up quicker. So it's kind of counterintuitive to say that the newer players at the start give them less dice, but that's basically what happens. Everybody's there to be enjoying themselves, so everybody's going to help each other out. If you've all got your own dice, it is easier for people to fall in the trap of being an individual, which then takes them a little bit longer to figure out that the person next to them maybe needs a bit of help. So that's probably what I would think. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
So it's an interesting point you had, and you'll have to forgive me a second. We're back. So yeah, I think I've not had many kind of issues with people having own dice and stuff, but I think what's a good point is, I mean, although I do find people doing this a lot, where they like a bunch of guys that I started with maybe 6 months ago or something. They've been desperate. It turned out of nowhere these guys were desperate to play D&D for like ages and ages. They've been about months and months, and I didn't even know they were even interested. I'm sitting going, I run games like every second week, you know. But they all went and bought dice, and it was one of these things that's just like they came with like loads of dice, and I'm like, oh my god, there's so many. And they tended to actually ask for help and stuff, although I did catch a lot of fudging rolls sometimes.
Oh, right, okay.
But I think it's just one of these things. You'll know if you want to go buy some dice, it's worth doing. Don't do what I did though, where I just went and bought a whole bunch of them, and then I bought metal dice and stuff. And I mean, I only really used 2 of them, like 2 sets. Although to be fair, you know, when I have people around now, there's a lot of times where if I'm running games, or even if it's running it either here or at the comic shop, I'll pack a few extra ones, and it's for the other players as well, you know. And it just helps them, they get used to it, helps them save the commitment of buying it, although it must be not a lot of money to buy dice. But yeah, no, dice is a good one though, because you'll find very quickly you'll have an urge to buy more dice, and it gets a lot. And the guys I mentioned a minute ago, I mean, some of the guys I think they've bought like 10, 15 different packs of dice. Like, and they don't, we play a lot, but it's not, speaking about commitments earlier, and not having a schedule and stuff, like, with that group, we'd actually had the idea that we weren't going to have a schedule, although we wanted to play regularly and play kind of longer games. We had, our schedule was, we would have no schedule because we knew, because of everybody's calendars, like some people work night shift, you know, I'm working throughout the week, and then I was doing other work as well on top of that, maybe at nights or at the weekend. So it's like we knew it would be hard to get everybody together. But it's funny because even though we've had that inconsistent schedule, that we've all got so many dice. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I think that's about it. The other thing though as well is, like, you don't need to go and buy dice straight away. You've got free apps that provide all this stuff for you. It's tactilely though, it feels good to have dice and rolling a table. And then if it fails, at least you can blame the dice. But if you use the app, you can blame the software. But yeah, there's loads of apps. There's plenty of them. We don't need to plug any, because literally if you type in dice, you'll get a whole bunch.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Certain, we'll end up talking about in a wee minute as well. Even things that are apps for character sheets and character generation and things, sometimes they've got dice rollers built in. A flip side as well to that is that you need then an electronic device, which then means that it might run out of power, or a website that you're using isn't working, or, you know, whatever other technological issue that might arise. Whereas if you've got an actual physical set of dice there, then you have that as a backup. You know, you never have to power them up. They're there, they're ready to go, and, you know, all it takes is just to pick them up and throw them. So dice are a good option from that point of view, albeit that technological issues hopefully are not very rare, are rare.
Are rare. I mean, I think we have a physical issue at the comic shop where we constantly lose our dice because we're throwing it and it flies across the room. But I mean, I think really, in short though, like in terms of running game, getting started with playing games, you know, in terms of, you'll need dice because you'll need them, but like you've got three options. You've got dice rollers, you've got character apps that have dice rollers in them. You've got things like Roll20, which has it's actually a virtual tabletop that has dice rolling in it. Or it's always worth just buying. If you're getting dice, I definitely recommend getting a big bundle. It's like a tenner, because you could be paying £2-3 anyway for one set in a shop. So get a bunch at a tenner on Amazon, and you're going to get like 7 of them, and you'll have more than what you're going to ever need. I've never needed the 8 sets that I've got. I pretty much just use my metal dice and usually 1 or 2 of the other ones if I'm playing a big baddie or something. When I'm running a game, I've got all my dice, because obviously they do a lot of damage, so I want to pick them all up and just launch them on the table. But I think that's it. What all I've got to say about dice. Have you got
for the dramatic effect of that, the dice explosion?
Yeah. Well, that's it. And usually, I've been playing or running Curse of Strahd, which is a fantastic campaign. And yeah, I mean, to be honest though, it is some of the damage. These are like level 2 people in the fight in Curse of Strahd, who's a big evil bad guy. And it's like the damage is like that. It feels like you're just picking up all the dice and just throwing them down, and then they're sitting going, "Where's all my hit points?" But yeah, I do like that.
Yeah, and again, that's pretty much dice in a nutshell. The only other thing that again you kind of touched on a wee bit, of all the things that you will ever buy relating to Dungeons and Dragons, dice are probably the things that are not going to break the bank for you. So of all the things that you might think about purchasing, it's probably one to think about first, just purely because you need them all the time. It gives you a backup to your electronic stuff if anything flakes out, and again, it's not going to break the bank, so dice is probably one of the first things to think about getting.
Yeah, I would actually say if you are interested, if you play a game and you're actually like, I would like to play more, I would say just double down and get some dice, actually, now thinking about it, because even if you're not going to play D&D, you're going to use them in another role-playing game, whether it be Call of Cthulhu, Trails of Cthulhu, Cult, Divinity Lost. I could list a whole bunch that I've got over there. But yeah, you're going to be using dice at some point, so it's definitely worth just getting yourself a few sets, because there's nothing worse than losing your D20 and then you're sitting going,
Yeah, and again, that's a great point as well. Like, if you buy a rulebook for Dungeons and Dragons, you have a rulebook for Dungeons and Dragons. If you buy a rulebook for Call of Cthulhu, you have a rulebook for Call of Cthulhu. If you buy yourself a set of dice, you have dice that will work for practically every RPG that is out there, unless you get something a bit kind of interesting that's got its own unique set or whatever. But most games, most systems will use the kind of standard, if you like, set of dice. So that, again, if it's a £2 pack of dice and you're paying that, then that £2 investment is then going to last you, or not last you, sorry, is then going to translate across everything that you do from that point forward. Whereas if you buy a £40 book, then that's only going to work for your Dungeons and Dragons or that system or whatever it is you're doing. So dice is definitely, I would say, the most economic way to do things.
Now, thinking about it, dice should have been the first one, because that would have been short, because it would say, yeah, it's cheap and you're going to use them. And well, the problem is, I suppose, a lot of people I know, they've got like dice addiction. They just keep buying. I mean, I spoke to somebody, they've got like, I think they're approaching 20 sets. They've been playing for years, and they play every week on. They stream their games and stuff. So I mean, it is. But literally, if you hear their thing, it's like going through it, and I'm like, oh my god, they must have a tin just full of dice. But anyway, that's literally the only risk. It can't get any better, So yeah.
Yeah, is at this point we put the disclaimer about the dice buying, and we can't be held legally responsible. And
for your gambling addiction, it brings out. It's not technically gambling with D&D, but who knows? If you have enough D6s, you could. But anyway, so cool. All right, I think that's it from me about dice. So I think the next thing, and we've kind of touched on this at different parts, and I think getting started, it's important to kind of look about, or just at least just think about the time and the research that you're going to have, or at least that you're going to put into when you're getting started at playing D&D.
Yeah.
To be honest, we have covered a lot of this, in particular, like when we speak about learning the rules, and I think a lot of it, if you're getting started playing, it's worth just delegating that to the DM, because that's what they're there for, and that's more often than not, your DM's probably played either a few or a good amount of games. So it is just one of these things, just you can delegate a lot of that like we've talked about, but it's definitely worth just considering some of the stuff you will be looking at doing. I think really when it comes to playing, let's say you've bought the Player's Handbook and I'm not sure where to start, you don't actually need to read the whole book to get started.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and again, even the Dungeons Master's Guide and other things, there are going to be rules and pointers and all sorts of things that you just don't need to know. I mean, just thinking off the top of my head as an example, if you are playing a campaign that is based in the middle of a city, and you maybe venture outside that city within a few miles of wherever that is, and in that whole setting you do not come across a lake or the sea or a particularly big river, chances are you probably don't need to know how long it takes to take on and off armour in case you fall in and start sinking. Chances are you don't need to know, sticking with the water theme, how to sail a boat, because chances are you're not going to come across anything like that at all.
Or even swimming.
Yeah, swimming as well, same thing. What is your swimming speed? How quick can you swim? Realistically, you're not going to come across anything like that. So that is a whole section that you can bin. You don't need to look at, you don't need to spend that time looking at, and you don't need to put in that research, which then means ultimately you can look at things that are important, like how to roll dice, how to read dice, what certain words that relate to that mean, looking at your character sheet, which we'll be talking about shortly as well, putting the time into that, putting the research into how to read that. That's things that are going to be a lot more useful to you. So at that point, it's probably a good idea to have a talk with your DM about the kind of thing that's going to be in the campaign, to give you an idea of the kind of thing that you maybe need to look at. And as a DM, it's probably good as well to have a think about that beforehand, so that you know the kind of things that you need to look at, that you need to know about in case you get asked questions. Sorry, you were...
No, that's it. I think you've really covered all the main stuff, and I think if you're playing, I mean, to be honest, you see, if you just get the Player's Handbook, you don't really need that much. If you know how to do basic saving throws and stuff, which we'll cover a bit more on how that's worked out in the character side of things. But when you're reading the rules, really actually the best way I'd done it when I started reading the Player's Handbook, because I roughly knew the basics anyway, because we'd played long enough. But once I get the Player's Handbook, I just went, okay, so I'm going to make a character, and then I looked at all the stuff. I started with just making a character, and then I looked at all the things that were associated and I would be directly using as a player for that character, and that included, sometimes it did include swimming, because it would say your swim speed is equal to your actual movement speed, and for other classes it isn't. But then you've got things like dark vision is pretty common, but your spells, and then that makes you go, okay, I should maybe look at how to cast spells and how does that work for actions, and just that gives you a kind of more engaging or organic way of learning how to pick up these games without sitting and going, okay, start from page 1 and going to page whatever the end is. And it's actually the same, it isn't just for learning the game. This is the same for even campaign guides. I've learned even the Curse of Strahd. I just look at the stuff that I know is going to be coming up next. Yeah. And it's the same thing when you're learning how to play. Everything else like bonus actions and various other stuff, you'll pick that up kind of pretty quick anyway by reading the Player's Handbook. But your DM will probably have taught you how to do that anyway by the time you've bought this book. So the main stuff for me is definitely anything that's essential to your character. Now that will include things like actions and bonus actions, but more importantly it's the abilities, and you'll pick all that up. Then the more characters you make, the more of that you'll pick up, and the longer you play a particular class and background, you'll learn what they do, because backgrounds were a bit. When I first played, because I'm used to like Cthulhu at the time, it was like you have your class, but then you've got your backgrounds, which then affect what proficiencies you've got and stuff.
Yep.
And all that feeds into your character sheet. But it's if you just go through it at a kind of organic character creation level, you'll start to learn all of that, and it won't be so bad. And before you know it, you'll be like, oh, I need to do this check, no problem, and you'll be doing it. And
and it becomes automatic.
Yeah, because I think really, as long as you know how to roll your dice and read them as a player and take your hit points off, that's pretty much all you need.
That's 90% of the work done.
It is, and literally the exception is if you've got a class that maybe has a special type of rule, like a barbarian in its rage, or a sorcerer with sorcery points and meta magic, which you wouldn't get at level 1. Or how wizards spells work, which some classes are more complicated than others, but just reading the rules will teach you all of that. Or reading the rules when you're making the characters, and picking things that are essential to your character will teach you all of that.
And again, the thing is that we're not saying do loads and loads of research before you turn up, so that when you turn up you'll do everything perfect. That's not what we're saying. What we're meaning here is that if you look over, again, assuming this is somebody that's never done Dungeons and Dragons at all before, just physically looking at the character sheet is going to be a massive help, because then when you actually have to start referring to it, you don't need to scan the whole document to work out what's here, what's there, and things like that. So if you do that little bit of preparation beforehand, it means that when you're there on the day, things flow easier. Whereas if you've not done that, you can just get lost. But don't go down the rabbit hole of looking at every single micro bit of detail and forcing yourself to try and get everything committed to memory. If you're totally new, you're going to need help, you're going to need pointers, and you're going to need time to start going through all these different things. So that is totally fine. Everybody knows that, everybody accepts that. It is no problem at all. But if you've got that little bit of prep work, it's going to make things a lot easier for you, and it's going to help you relax more, and you're not going to get as worked up potentially about things as you would have if you never done that.
Do you know what? That's a good point. Because I'm coming from the angle of basically picking up, just reading through the stuff that's essential to your character, and you obviously don't need to learn it all. But actually, even if you take it back further than you've maybe played a game or two, and you're now making your own guys with your handbook and taking it to right to the start, because that's a good point. Even just literally, if you've got access to the handbook, just having an idea of what you want to play, and just start with the races. Just start there. There is bonuses and all this other stuff, but if you get an idea of just what it is each race can give you, just by reading the lore chunks that you get, that kind of helps set your expectations up for how this guy might be played and stuff. And even taking that to a DM, they'll be able to, especially if it's player's handbook stuff, you might find generally it's easy for a DM to go, okay, if it's an elf, okay, you get an extra dexterity, you get dark vision, you get some spells at the beginning. It really actually helps, and just that even minor bit of research that you're not committing loads of time with or time to, it helps a lot. And as you just play more, it becomes a case of then just reading the stuff that's essential. But starting off, it's just start and pick the things that just have a cursory glance at what you would be interested in, and the DM will help you the rest of the way.
And again, I think that's a great point as well, that if you read the lore part for the races as an example, then you've not looked at what bonuses they get, you've not looked at any technical stuff, you've not looked at any detail in that sense, you've just looked at the kind of the guide, the overview of what's going on there, which then gives you an idea of, like you're saying, what you want to do, but it also gives you that starting point, that launch pad for what you will do, which then means you can talk to a DM or fellow players or whatever it is, work out what it is that you're doing, and then go and do that. So even though that's something that's very small ultimately in the grand scheme of things, and it's something that doesn't necessarily relate to playing the game, you might be surprised at how well that helps, or how much that helps rather.
I mean, that's what I'd done for, it was the first time I played a drow and a barbarian, and it was just I thought I wanted to try something a bit different. So I've always been kind of other types of classes, but never been a kind of brute type character. And sorry, not a drow. It's a Duergar. The drow's the elf one. So the purple dwarfs in layman terms, but yeah, even just having that little bit of stuff there. I mean, I'd played a lot at that point, but even then I just had an idea of what I wanted. And a lot of the time you find you get what's called a session 0, and what that is character creation a lot of the time, and building characters with your pals. So even just having that basic thing, even if you read, let's say you've just started and you've got 2 or 3 classes you want to play, or races, you go, I might want to be an elf, might want to be a dwarf, and I might want to be a halfling. Even just kind of the basic summary of what those types of characters are, and taking that to a DM at a session 0, that's going to be more than enough for them to go, okay, great, and they'll have an idea of how to help direct you and maybe even guide you in what stats you might need. Now the game does tell you stats, but I find a lot of the time if you learn a lot of this as you play, and especially if you've got an app to help kind of direct maybe your character creation. But a lot of the time, if you're just doing it as you go and doing it organically, which is kind of what we've been saying for a lot of this stuff, you'll pick it up and it's going to be dead easy. And it does reduce that time and research that's required, because just because you're putting a commitment into playing these games, like buying dice, and especially if you buy like the triple handbooks, the core handbooks, DM's Guide, Monster Manual, and the Player's Handbook, you know, you might feel like you have to owe it to yourself to sit down and study the book, but you'll probably find you forget most of it, you know. So there's no shame in just, even if you're running a game, but again, that'll be another episode, but even just getting the highlights, the essentials, and then moving into playing or running, that's going to help you a lot better, just keeping it retained, I think. I think that's it for me in terms of this particular section. Have you got anything else to add, or is that you?
No, I think that's just pretty much everything wrapped up there. Again, main points, putting in a bit of research beforehand, it's going to speed everything up, it's going to help you get familiar, it's going to make you feel comfortable, but don't flip to the other extreme to the point that you've done so much that you're bogged down with a lot of information that you don't necessarily need. So it's, I mean, like everything, it's about finding a balance. The newer you are at it, the less time and research you should be putting in. The further into it you are, the more time and research you should be putting in, or rather than more time and more research, that what you're doing is you're looking at a more complex theme. So still spending the same amount of time, still doing the same amount of research, but you're going into a topic that's leading on from a previous topic, which is led on from a previous topic, rather than the actual basic core starting point.
Yeah, totally. If you are somebody that does want to invest a lot of time in research into actually your characters and stuff, that's totally okay as well. But I just know from experience that sometimes it's just like, oh god, you feel like you're reading pages and pages. And I mean, really the point is, like, have fun with the research, which is why I generally, especially with new players, I'm kind of just saying, give me an idea. If I'm meeting a guy with somebody, I'll basically ask them, you know, what sort of character do you want? And usually they go, I've got no idea because I've never played this before. But that's when I as DM kind of come in and suggest stuff, and they maybe go and think about it after we've had this chat. But usually I can recommend a couple classes that they can look at the summary at. But basically, you know, for me, I just personally learn better when I'm just learning the essentials as I go. And the point for me is just have fun with the research, you know. Don't worry about needing to learn everything, because it isn't an exam you're going to do when you go and play. The reality is you'll show up and you've forgotten all the exam questions and answers anyway, you know. So, and your DM will keep you right, you know. It'll take a few games before you're comfortable, and that's a pretty standard thing. I've seen most people don't feel comfortable playing the guy, their character, and it's either because of rules or because they don't know their character well enough generally. But everybody is there. I'm still there with certain characters if I build some multi-class thing that I've never really done before. You know, I'm not going to be like super on the ball with it, and it'll take a few games, but it's just part of the learning experience. So and everybody will be on that boat probably if it's a bunch of new players. Like if this getting started guide encourages either yourself to run a game or encourages one of your pals that's maybe played a bit before to run a game, you'll all be in the same boat and you'll all be learning, you know. And that's a lot of the fun, you know.
And that's the thing, and as well it makes doing that a lot easier as well. So another thing that's a kind of wee tip just before we sign off is that rather than doing the research by yourself, do it with somebody as well, because then you can talk and you can discuss. And following on from when we made the previous point about the rules, that sometimes things can be interpreted in different ways between the two of you or three of you or however many people that are there, you can figure out what the best fit of the wording is that then hopefully should make things a bit easier for you. And if you can do that with an experienced player until you're at a point where you feel confident enough and that you can do a lot of the reading and the research and preparation and things by yourself, then grab that experienced player as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of leads us quite nicely into using characters in your character sheet.
Yeah. So, next thing that you need is a character. So if you've not got character to play, well,
it's going to be hard.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Unless you're the DM, in which case you've got lots of characters to play. But that's kind of moving on to the realms of something else. But basically, you need a character. And the most efficient way to record the stats of your character is on the character sheet. Now, you can get that from the Wizards of the Coast website, and then you can download that, print that off, and all that other stuff that you need to do. And then that keeps everything all nice and recorded. Now, kind of tying into time and research a little bit, the first time I ever seen a character sheet, it was a frightening experience. There's loads of boxes, there's lots of things written down, there's the same thing written more than once, but they all mean something ever so slightly different. So putting that little bit of time in, having a look at it, getting that over and done with before you turn up for the game, good idea. And again, if you've got somebody that's an experienced player that can point out, no, here's where you need to look for this role, right, okay, and whatever else, and explaining some of what's going on, that's going to help massively. But long and short, you need a character and you need somewhere to record that information. So you need to build the character first of all. So I'll let you have a talk about this.
Yeah, so I've kind of covered some of this just in that last point about time and research. And for me, building a character is if you're starting off, just find something you're interested in, and if you've got that experienced player at DM, read the main highlights and see what you're interested in. And it's always worth discussing it with your DM before you start. As soon as you start building, that's when it gets a bit more kind of time committed. So your DM will basically be able to guide you on what it is that class or race is good at doing, and does that fit what you want to play. If you want to be somebody sneaky like a rogue or something, then obviously a high strength, low dex creature or character might not fit your kind of technical your archetype, so to speak. But it's definitely worth I think a lot of this is just about speaking to your DM and stuff, and before you start building. And as you build, that's where, similar to what we were saying earlier, you can start to read all the different rules and things that come off of that, and any branching things you might need to know, like spells if you're a spellcaster. But for the most part as well, the character sheet, once you start playing, and if you can get any time with somebody before the game, don't be afraid to say, hey, I don't really understand how this stuff works and how it looks and proficiencies, what's the point, and saving throws, why is my saving throw +5 but everything, but my constitution saving throws +5 but it's actually +3 on the left, and you can get somebody to explain what all that means. And I mean, really it boils down to your stats, your strength and constitution and all that stuff, and your proficiencies, which increase those modifiers, for each skill. But somebody will sit you down and help you with that. And when you build it, definitely what's worth doing, I think Jamie might have touched on that, a bit of it already, is it's cool actually working on a bit of backstory, and that's where speaking to your DM will help you inform your character. And we've done that a lot.
That's the thing. Probably one of the better ways to think about a DM is like a referee. So they're gonna keep things to the rules. They're gonna weigh in. Again, this is going a bit off topic, but if there was disagreement between two sets of players, and again, there's a lot of time getting wasted and whatever else, then they come in, they have their say on it, and that's it. Just work with that, go with that. So they're the rule keeper. And again, think about them like a referee. That's probably the best way. So then when you come and you turn up with your character, don't get upset if they ask you to tweak a couple of things. Don't get upset if they ask you to completely rewrite it. If you turn up and you go, here's my character, and you slide it across the table, and you've got some sci-fi Jedi type thing that you're wanting to do, but their idea for their campaign setting is in a kind of, North American sort of plains Indian tribe sort of setting that they want to do, that very clearly is a bit of a clash and is not going to work. So if that's their story and they explain that's the reason to you, and at this point, if you're a DM and you're listening, or if you're a DM or somebody that's thinking about being a DM, don't be afraid to explain things. Don't worry that you're maybe going to give too much of a plot away, or you spoil a surprise or anything like that. Explain the reason why you're doing it. So if you're saying, no, I need you to come up with a completely new character, that's quite a big decision to make. So I would say definitely explain why you're doing that, rather than I need you to do a new character because it doesn't fit. Explain why it doesn't fit, because then the person will well, number one, they're not going to come back to you with a slightly modified version of the same character, which is going to save time, but it's also going to give them the context for why you're doing it, and you're getting them involved in a part of your story from the earliest point, rather than they turn up and then all of a sudden it's just kind of there and thrown at them.
I like that, and I want to flip that the other way as well, because if you have got something and you're really, like, let's say you give it to somebody and a DM's like, I'm not sure about that, it is actually up to yourself and the DM to find that middle ground, because there's always going to be one. You might be asked to revamp your character. If somebody was going to be that strict, you won't find that a lot. The only times that would happen is if it's something really blatantly not within the context of what the game's going to be played. But I mean, you're always going to get agreement. So instead of having a Jedi, it could be in your a Jedi. You have a Jedi type character, but you're in a. I was going to say a tribal thing, but it's plenty of tribal examples in Star Wars. Well,
again, just off the top of my head, something that you might do is the DM might have had an example to do North America before the colonization. So if it was a Plains Indian tribe, or whatever it was, that they are there before any Europeans have turned up. So your compromise for that could be, well, if you are a European who's turned up, so rather than you're running around with bits of sci-fi equipment. And again, don't make the mistake that D&D is only something that's in medieval Europe. There are futuristic settings. There's all sorts of different things. So don't make that mistake, like I did way back at the start. But you could be a European that's turning up with European technology and European armour and things. So by contrast, you look like someone from a totally different planet, a totally different dimension. But that's potentially a way of getting those two things to marry together and fuse.
Yeah, because either you're going to get a backstory narrative for why that your thing isn't, while you're not strictly within the guidelines, so to speak, there's definitely ways that you and the DM can work in backstory narrative to make it work. Or you can tweak details to make it so it's not going to be the same as what you asked for, but it's going to be tweaked so maybe the inflection's different. There's plenty of ways to for that to do it. And actually, talking about time and research, see if you don't want to put any time and research into building a character, because you will need one at some point when you play. But if you're just not that interested in the character build process because you think it's too much of a big step, or maybe you don't have the handbook yet, it's totally worth asking for any pre-generated characters to be given. There's plenty of resources that you can do that yourself, although it might be a bit daunting with all the big lists. But your DM, you could ask them to make you a type of character if they're going to be willing to do it. He or she will do that with you. or for you, and they can just give you one. And then once you've been given a sheet, that's actually a good way to then go, once you've got the sheet in front of you, you can then research what's on your sheet, because that'll build your confidence with reading the sheet, but also finding stuff in the book. So there's always a fallback that if you don't have a character, you can be provided one. Usually I've got a handful of characters that people can just play, and I've done that before when I've showed up to like the comic shop I go to quite frequently, and if somebody says, oh, can they join your game, which can happen quite a lot, I've had to say no a couple of times just because of numbers and high level campaigns for new players. There's a lot of stuff there, and it would feel off-putting definitely for some people being thrown into the mix like that. But on other times where it is maybe we're starting a new campaign, there's lower level players, like everybody's new, and then a new person gets invited into play. It's just a case of, have you made a character? Probably not, unless I've sat down with staff. I can just spin round my sheet or a sheet and provide it, and then I've got something that I can coach them through in terms, because they'll not know how to play, but it's part of the coaching experience and part of the learning curve for them. So yeah, I think that's really my main stuff for this one.
And again, that's a good way of doing it. Don't worry about having a pre-generated character. Flip side of that, don't worry about making the character. Just figure out what you're comfortable with and go with that. And again, remember that the DM's job is not to be authoritarian. It's not to say this is the way this and this is supposed to happen. Their job is to get harmony at the table, and as well as that is to get everybody enjoying themselves. That is what they're there to do. It's not they're turning up with their story and you're all going to sit through it. That's not what's happening, or at least that's not what should happen. Again, they might be really passionate about doing a particular story or whatever else, so there's going to be ebb and flow with that. It's going to be more about what they're saying, and other times it's going to be more about what you're doing, and everything in between. But at the end of the day, there's not a right answer, there's not a wrong answer. Personally speaking, for me, I would have probably preferred the pre-generated character at the start, and then it would be something that I could work with and kind of figure out what's going on. And then as time progressed, I would have merged towards building characters. Now, because we started off with doing our own characters and it's kind of went from that, now for 90% of the time I would build something straight away, bit of dialogue backwards and forwards with the DM, whoever it is. But every so often, even though we've been doing this for a good while now, every so often I still would like a pre-generated character, purely and simply just for something a bit different, because it's a different mindset you need to go in, because you're working with somebody else's idea and then you're having to kind of bring that to life, so to speak, or use different things that you might not have picked. So just as a kind of a challenge every now and then, I would quite like doing that, but I don't always get the chance to do it, because a couple of the DMs are very much in the camp of character creation rather than pre-generation, so don't always get the chance to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is as well, speaking of pre-gens, actually, and it's something I never thought about until now, if you'd rather be given something, especially if you're new and you just want to be given content that you can kind of absorb, if you get given something and you're not quite happy with it, then actually feel free to go and tweak that pre-gen. That'll teach you how to do it without needing to do it every step.
That's exactly it, because then what you're doing is you're tweaking, you're not building, and that
it's less work. I mean, that's really what it is. And you said something there, I can't remember which bit it was. I think really, that's what it was. So for me, I'm actually now, I used to build loads of characters, and now there's games, and there's to the dismay of several people that I know, I actually, depending how I feel, there's some games that I might play that I don't really know what I want to play, and I've played enough characters to know what I like, and there's some that classes I've not played, but I've also not even that interested in playing them. So some games I'll just random generate stuff by rolling dice and picking just where the dice falls, but super easy, and it takes less than 20 seconds to do is just auto-generate a character. There's loads of those resources, and if you're completely new, it might be a bit daunting. But certainly if you're somebody that's listening that's played a lot of games, and I have quite a tight schedule during the week, so sometimes it can be hard batting forward and back different concepts with other like DMs and things. If I'm playing a game or something, I can find it hard just the whole process. It can literally take all week because I can't respond every time I get a message. It might be several hours later before I can get back to somebody. So I just generate one, and then I go, okay, usually what happens is I go, I've never played this flaming class before, I don't know anything about this, or at least it did for a while. And from there I can then pick up, and kind of like as if it's the first time I've played, I'm going back and reading the essentials for those characters. And for me, auto-generating characters is a super good way to just pick up stuff and having to just run, with the hot potato. Although I wouldn't recommend it for the first time if it's depending on how high level that you might be asked to start at level 3. So I would caution against just for the first time pre-generating a character for that level, because you're going to get stuff in there that's going to be different traits and different paths. But it's always an option if you want to feel adventurous and you're up for a bit of a challenge. I think auto-generating one would be interesting, assuming it gets cleared by your DM and they allow it. So yeah,
and again, just a wee quick point from what you were saying, as a DM, be patient with the players if they are creating something, because again, people have got work, people have got, if they're at university or college or anything like that, they've got study time that they need to do, and all sorts of different things, family that they need to be around, help, care for, whatever the unique personal circumstances. So be patient. If you're from the DM's point of view, don't panic that you haven't heard from somebody in the last 10 minutes and that they're running rampant and they're going to drop a Jedi in North America in the 1200s or whatever, right? Don't panic about that. Just trust them, give them time, give them space, they'll get back to you. And again, same thing from the player point of view, that if you put forward your idea, just because you haven't heard back from the DM in the last 15 minutes doesn't mean that they're they're trying to find some way of letting you down gently, letting you down easy. Like, people are busy, and again, you need patience for scheduling games when everybody's going to be there, and you need patience for when it comes to the more creative parts that take a bit longer, such as creating the characters and settings and stories and things like that. So just, again, easiest way to avoid all this heartache, communicate.
Yes, communication is key, and it's something that you find very frequently does not work properly in, like I've spoken about Discord and all that. You're probably more often than not going to come across communication problems, but I think that's a topic for another time, because that's a whole episode. Because I've got loads of examples of that. But yeah, I think then we move on to the last point, if you're comfortable with that.
Yep. So the final thing that is an absolute essential that you need is a story.
Yes, so a story. And now that's something we might go into more detail, especially getting started with a DM and then, or as a DM, running the game and then moving forward into other episodes. But it's important to have a story, and actually, there's loads of ways to do it. You can have, if you're just doing a one shot, so a game that lasts one session, the story is going to be something really simple, and look, you might be surprised if you're new, but literally 2 different events would probably cover a whole night if you've got a group of 4 people. Depending how exploratory everybody is, but for the most part, I find a couple of key events is more than enough, if not more than one night. But yeah, so do you want to take off some of the story stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have a story, you don't have a game. The story is the thing that the players are working their way through, and again, the story, I suppose another way that we could have titled this was story / world building, or something like that. But your story, your world that you create is what they're exploring, working around, and doing all that sort of stuff. So you as the DM, you need to figure out, do you have something that's linear? Do you want them to go from place A to place B, or event A to event B, and work their way through that until they get to whatever the conclusion is? Or do you want to make it so that you've got event A, B, C, D, and depending on what one they pick, then might lead to events 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which then might lead to events, whatever. So do you want it open? Do you want them to explore? And that's something you need to decide before you start, so that you've got a clear path for how things work out. Now, if you are totally brand new, the best thing I would say personally would be, don't go down the open world route. You're giving yourself lots and lots and lots of things to juggle here and to work with. Pick something linear that it's point A to point B to point C, and make the links to each of those points, make them quite obvious, so that the players don't end up wandering off and down a different path, which then gives you more work to do to try to get them back onto that path. Make it nice and obvious, nice and simple. See how things go. Once you've done that once, once you've done it twice, however many times until you feel comfortable. Keep the linear element, but see how they interact with it. Give them less of a clue and less of a clue, and then gradually through doing that, you'll start to make things more open world.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you're in terms of getting started as a player, when it comes to the story, your DM's going to handle all that, but the thing is, if you're all new, or at least if you're all starting a new story, it's absolutely worth mentioning, either asking the DM to sit down with you and kind of chat. Maybe that's what happened during the session 0. But if you're interested in a type of story, it's worth mentioning to your DM, because it's if you want to do something spooky or something a bit more campy with loads of action and it's just kind of hilarity or something, or if you do go down a kind of more serious and maybe emotional story and things, your DM, they'll be going and making that. You as a player will be playing it, but definitely put your kind of 2 cents in, because it's going to be more interesting for you if you're playing a story you want to play, and it also helps your DM direct a story that's going to work, because from that, what will probably happen is you'll be given a very simple one shot to start. At least how I generally do it, it's a simple one shot if it's the first time, just to make sure everybody's okay with the game. And I'll maybe have that as one part of a bigger story, so it gives us the option to kill it there if we want to try something else, or we can then follow it on with new things. But leave that part to your DM. There's no point in you worrying about it. Jamie's right though, if you're doing just a one game thing, don't do open world. That's something that's going to be, or at least don't ask for open world as a player. Just ask for something, a type of theme that you want, and you'll get what you need. I think that's about it, because I think anything else I've got to talk or anything else to bring up about that is something that's probably a separate episode, so I don't want to bog down the new players, but
I mean, that's the thing. The story is pretty much going to be the domain of the DM, but don't fall in the trap either as a DM or as a player in thinking that the players don't have any control before the story is being played out. So just like Jordan was saying there, if you as a player really want to do something scary, talk to the DM about it, because they might not have thought about that, or they might think that the thing that you really want to do is something that's fun and light-hearted, but you want something a bit darker, a bit more serious. So again, communication, going back to that way back when we first mentioned it, good communication is going to get everybody the best experience. But from the story point of view, because Dungeons and Dragons is unique in the sense that you don't, like Monopoly, you open the box, there's the rules, everybody goes around the board, that's it. Dungeons and Dragons is different, because whoever is running the game, the DM, they've came up with the story that everybody's playing through, and that story might change depending on the actions of the player during that game. So it's really, really fluid in that sense. So again, don't fall in the trap of going, the DM does the story bit, we do the characters end of,
And that's
what it is. There always has to be dialogue between the DM and the players with every single element of this. And again, think about the DM like a referee. You put forward your ideas, they have all those ideas, they also have their own ideas, and then they're going to pair it back to what they think the best option is out of that.
Yeah, definitely. And what I would say, I think really the only other thing I would say for players getting started with D&D in terms of the story element is once you kind of know what you're doing, because the DM will have the idea of what they want to play or run for you, and that could involve previous kind of collaboration and conversation between yourself and the DM. But one thing you could do is actually ask, once that's all established, even if you've had a character made, you could say, how can I add is there anything I can do to add this story into my backstory? Is there any story elements that you would like to actually integrate into your character? Because one, that's going to give you a wee bit of a nice little sneak peek into what you're going to be playing, and that will help inform whether or not you want to play it or not, or if there need to be any changes. But it also kind of it will make it easier for you as a player if you've got some link to the story that's getting played to your backstory. As long as there's some connection in there, you'll actually find it a lot easier to decide or make decisions during the game. Because I find there's games that if you go open world, a lot of the problems that I've had and seen is you kind of go, okay, you're plunked in, you're in open world, and you're kind of like, I don't know what to do. You don't know how to interact with anything. Whereas actually just engaging with your DM in terms of the story and designing something that you want to target key themes or tones, you can definitely, it's worth linking that into your character sheet and the backstory as well, just to circle that background.
Yeah, and again, just from that point of view, I fell in the same trap there that I told everybody not to fall into, which was thinking about the story pretty much only through the DM's eyes. So rather than thinking about it from the player point of view, which is if it's open world, and if you're totally brand new, then there's so much about you that you can be interacting with and exploring and all this sort of thing, but you've also got your character sheet to be worrying about, and what does that mean, and what was so-and-so's character again, and what do they do, and is that an important piece of information to remember, is that not an important piece? So you've got all this stuff going on, and if it's open world, that is just more and more things for you to potentially remember, rather than if you make the story really linear and really obvious, it's going to guide everybody through, and it's going to get everybody moving, and it's going to get, hopefully, or it should, at least from what I think, and again I think what you pretty much think as well, it's going to get the most fun and the most enjoyment from it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think there's definitely utility in having stories that aren't linear as a one shot, but I think you should really be aware that that's probably not going to be a one shot. But then if everyone's okay with that, it's okay too. But I just find if I'm introducing people to D&D or like even Call of Cthulhu, there's people I know that played that I thought would for sure completely take the rip out it, or just not be interested in it because it's horror themed. And actually these were the two players that were right into it and doing voices that totally threw me off. Like, I couldn't believe it. But that tends to be because it was a tight story and it was a lot more linear, and they knew it was linear. They weren't expecting a huge interlinked amazing story, but they knew it was going to be linear, but it let them just focus on what they wanted to do, which was find the treasure in a pyramid or whatever, but that was the goal. That was the story. Go in, go get it. I mean, there's 2 points to that story, and then in between there was nonsense that stopped them from doing that. Yeah. But anyway, it's definitely a good place to start. But yeah, so I think that's maybe for me about it in terms of that. So I think unless there's anything else to add,
no, I think that's pretty much it. And again, hopefully you're still there, and hopefully you're still listening or watching, depending where you are. But we've tried to just go over the basics, and we've tried to give you a few pointers per each thing where things might not go to plan, a wee tiny bit of advice on what's maybe a good purchase, what's not a good purchase, and just general wee bits of advice. There's a lot of what we've went over, we've really only skimmed it, and at some point in the future you'll probably see a more detailed episode talking about
Yeah.
whatever those points are. But in the meantime, if there was something there that you desperately want us to go over, if you're not quite sure, then get in touch with us through social media channels, so Discord, whether it's comments on YouTube. There's Twitter there as well, there's Instagram as well, so get in touch with us there. And if you've not got anything that you want to ask but you've not followed us or liked us or subscribed in any of those things, then go do all that social media magic there as well. And other than that, I think that's pretty much us.
Yeah, I would definitely say if there's anything you want to kind of see put on, the thing is, we'll be covering some of this already, but we're definitely wanting to hear if there's anything burning that you want to talk about, because like we said, this was a cursory glance almost at everything, and we have touched a bit on starting as a player, starting as a DM. We'll focus much more on starting as a player, because we will be looking at things like DMing, and at some point, depending on what you guys ask for, we'll be looking at kind of all the specialist categories almost that might come up from all of that stuff, because it's big. And really, even if you're just wanting to hear experiences or conversations, we're up for doing that too, because what you'll probably find is, quite often we throw in little anecdotes and things and just have a chat almost just about some of these different bits, because it's happened, and it will happen again, and it's happened more than once in many cases.
Yep.
And it will happen to you probably, maybe not exactly the same, but like you will have a communication problem at some point. You will have a story that you didn't really know what you were getting and might not enjoy it, or on the flip side, you might love it. So definitely just get in touch with us through social media. And I think other than that, I'd just like to thank you guys for listening or watching or however you're actually consuming this bit of media. Yeah, it's been great to kind of sit here and chat and get the opportunity to do it with you. So yeah, thanks from me.
Yeah, and thanks from me as well. And again, going back to the start, would like to hear, what was it like first time that you turned up to a game? So let us know through whatever way you want to get in touch with us, and we'll see you soon.
Yep, see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.